Hello everybody, welcome to MySQL QA episode 2. It's been a little while since we had our last episode, but there have been some exciting things happening in between, as you probably saw online. So here we go for the second episode. So we'll have a look into JIT, Bazaar. We're not really using Bazaar anymore, but it's still interesting for older releases. We'll look into compiling, either using the scripts included with Percona Server or just manually compiling like you would be used to from other releases. And we'll also have a look at some build tools just to make your life a little bit easier. My name is Roel van Paar. I work for Percona. So let's get started. So here we are in our Percona QA directory. So if you haven't got Percona QA yet, I highly recommend you get it. Just install Bazaar. It's obviously installed on my machine, and then you simply go Bazaar branch launchpad Percona QA. And when you do this, it will create a directory, Percona QA, and so I recommend that you do this in your home directory because it's very easy. Once you're in some other directory, you can simply reference, for instance, any build scripts directly from your home directory. Okay, so let's just jump back. So for those of you that haven't worked with Bazaar yet, to pull in the latest updates, you simply go Bazaar pull, and this would pull in the latest changes. So I'm using an SSH passphrase key here, but you don't strictly need to if you're not going to make any updates. So there have been a few updates. We've been doing a lot of work with Tokutech, as you probably noticed. So you can see a number of scripts here, and we'll have a look into some of these now and some of these in the following episodes. But so again, you definitely want to get Percona QA for the weeks and months ahead. Simply go Bazaar branch launchpad Percona QA, let it pull in. That will take a little while, and do it so in your home directory. And if you haven't got Bazaar itself yet, simply just install it with yum. Okay, so to set up a server to make it able to compile Percona Server or MySQL Server, you're going to need quite a number of utilities, like for instance the compiler GCC. Now there is a script in here which is called setup server, but this particularly sets up a server quite extensively for QA purposes, and you might not want to run this, especially not if you're doing other things with your server. However, there is this yum install command here which installed most of the utilities that you need. So it's got a lot of other things too, right, like GDB, valgrind, setlib develop, you need that. So there's all sorts of items, but included are all the items that you need for compiling MySQL Server or Percona Server. Now, to make sure that you can get all the packages, just remember to enable EPEL, and here you can see the method of installing the EPEL 7 and EPEL 6 repos so that you can get all the tools in. You don't necessarily have to remove these items. I'm just removing them simply because they were causing some issues. So if you go ahead and you set up your EPEL and you enable debug info, and then you simply install all of these packages, you'll be ready for building a MySQL or Percona server. Of course, you could simply just execute most of that just directly from the command line. Just to give you an example of what it looks like, I'll just execute this, but of course I've installed all of these utilities before. And so in my case I don't think it would go ahead and install anything. Okay, so it's finding a few updates here. I'm not going to go ahead and update those at the moment. And just simply abort out of it. Okay, so I assume that you would set up some sort of directory in which you would pull your working tree into. So what is a working tree? A working tree is wherever the developers have pushed their code to. So in these days we're using Git, but in the past we used Bazaar. So I've just set up a directory in the root here, and you could simply do this by, I'll just set up a Bazaar2 so you can get an ID. Of course, because this is in root, I've got to use sudo. I'll change it to my user ID so that I don't have problems with root versus my user ID, and I'll just give it full rights. So again, you know, this is all just for testing servers. If you're doing this on some other machine, that might be a little bit too open, but you get the idea. So once you're in here, you could do Bazaar branch, launchpad, Percona Server, 5.6 or 5.5 or 5.1, and that would pull the latest available Bazaar branch. Now, as I was saying a few times already, we've stopped using Bazaar, so it's a bit older release, but you might still find it interesting to pull an older release, and then once you have that directory available, you could simply jump into Percona Server, or in the case of 5.6, change into the directory of 5.6. And once you're in there, you could do something like Bazaar revert -r, and here you would have some sort of revision number that you could get from the revert to an earlier branch of the tree. Okay. So these days we're using Git, and I've created a Git directory here in a similar way, just because it's very easy to reference, right? Bazaar and Git. So again, you would have to install Git, but if you followed the procedure up here to install all the tools, here it is. Somewhere in this list is Git as well. There it is. Okay, so once you've installed Git, so once you have Git, you can come into Git up here and have a look for Percona Server, and here you will find the clone URL. So just simply copy that to the clipboard, and then you can simply go git clone, and it will clone that particular project. Now in my case I've already done this previously, so I can simply just change into Percona Server, and there see all the files it's cloned from the Git repo. Now one very handy tip is I would highly suggest you do a git init in the current directory in Git, and something similar in the Bazaar directory, Bazaar init in the current directory. And what this does is it sets, let me just show you in Bazaar2, it sets this, I'm not sure if this is such a good idea, but you get the idea. It sets the local directory as a local repository, and there are several benefits to that. Once you start using different versions of Percona Server and whatever, it's much faster in terms of branching of particular trace. So let's just go back to our Git directory, and here we go to Percona Server. Now it's a little bit different in Bazaar, where you would have done Bazaar branch, Percona Server 5.6, and that would have created a 5.6 directory, 5.5 and 5.1 and so on. Now If you would have branched 5.1, it would have created the 5.1 directory. Now here with Git, we have to check out a particular branch. Now to see the list of branches, you can use -a, or if you use -r, you just get to see the remote branches. So here I've selected all local and remote branches, and we can see that there is a 5.6 branch. So we go to git checkout 5.6 and notice that I'm in the Percona Server directory, and this will, if you will, change switch the branch to 5.6, and so you can see how I could swap to 5.5. And just to show you how this works, if I look at the directory now, you can already see that it's different. So let me just have a look at the version, and indeed this is 5.5.4.1, and if I swap back to 5.6 and have a look at the version, now I'm 5.6. So this just gets a little bit of getting used to. You just have to think about it as one directory with various options you can switch to, various trees you can switch to, each being something different. So you will normally see a number of patches, and you can also see the standard working branches that the developers are working on at the moment. Okay, so once we've got the desired version, so in this case we're going to have a play with 5.6, we just need to make sure that we have gmake. So gmake is just a file required for compilation. Now in my case I've already downloaded it here. You can see the file here, but you could simply get it from Google Code by using a wget command. Simply get it. So I'm just going to abort out of this, and then just before compilation you could point it to wherever it is you've downloaded. So I'm just going to go back to where I was before, and now we're basically ready to build Percona Server. Now in the newer versions you find a build PS directory, and the older ones it would have been a build directory. So basically all you have to do is start a script here, build-binary, and I'm just going to start this up. And okay, so where do we build? Before I do this, what I usually do, just to make it very clean, because once you start building inside a directory, that directory will get cmake files and etc. So I usually, and my scripts do this too, copy this into another directory, then change into that new directory, and from there build. So it's a little bit cleaner, just keeps your original source tree very clean, and you don't have to do cleanups in there. So I'm just going to build right here in the current directory, and there you go. So if you missed that last little bit, I just entered a dot behind the command. So I'm just going to let this run, and when it's finished we'll continue the video. Okay, so the build has finished, and when we have a look at the directory we can see that our server has been built nicely, ready in a tar pile. And I'll just expand that one so that you can have a look as to what it looks like. And here you've got your standard bin directory, just a standard build server with all the tools, everything is nicely packed and ready for you to go. And if you're in QA, then of course you want to keep a copy of this file somewhere and note the versions that you're working with, because this will make it handy for the future if you have to reproduce a certain bug or etc. So usually my scripts copy out this file from this directory and then simply get rid of this directory altogether. That has one small negative aspect to it, and that is if you're using GDB later on to do some debugging, it will go and look for the source code on your server, and it will of course look for this particular directory. So you could leave this directory if you wanted to, but maybe then for starters it would have been good to include the release in the directory name, just in case you start working with multiple releases, etc. So of course I'm approaching this more from a QA perspective rather than from a customer perspective. Okay, so let's just swap back here. We're going to get rid of that directory, which was simply an example. Have a look at our branches. Oops, I'm in the wrong directory. So let's swap, for example, to just a testing branch for MySQL, well, Percona Server 5.7 we're working on. And let's look at, of course, this will have the build directory as well. In this case, it's the MySQL build directory. But let's have a look at using another way of building. So what I could have done, instead of using a build script, I could have used a cmake command. So for instance, cmake, the current directory, as a source. Then we're building a debug tree. We're setting some options to make sure that we get the right version of MySQL happening, and turning off the embedded server, etc., enable downloads, and oh, there's some duplication happening here, and basically boosting the download, which is not really necessary. So if you build like this, it will build very similar to the build script, but it's much more manual process. So once this process would be finished, then you would go make, and make would basically finish up, and then after that you can go make install or use one of the scripts, make binary distribution, which would make a tarball just like we've seen here. So it's a little bit more manual method. Why am I showing this? Well, for some people it might be interesting to start changing the options here, but what we could simply do, instead of building this way, we can use the build script that we've looked at before, build binary, and simply use the -debug option, and this will create a tarball as well, but debug compiled, so it will have debug instrumentation in it. You can also compile with Valgrind instrumentation if you want to run some Valgrind testing. So within QA we would usually use either debug or debug Valgrind to do our regression and stress testing. Okay, so all this is pretty straightforward. Still, you know, it involves a little bit of work getting used to. So you can use the build binary script, or you can do it more manually. But there have been a few tools developed already. So you can have a look at the build scripts in Percona QA. So the one that I would recommend checking out is build Percona sh, and maybe build Percona debug and build 5.7 debug. So within build Percona, what we're doing here is we're just checking that there is a make file which indicates that indeed we have a tree here, or if there is no such file, then it will try and branch from Bazaar, but this has to be updated, right, because we're now using Git. It's just a little bit older script. Most cases I would just execute the script from the Git directory, Percona Server. So we've checked out the 5.6 branch, and then we would simply go build Percona, and this would work from here. So it does the same gmake that we've done before, and I've shown you how you could make a copy just to keep it very clean build. So here I'm doing the same. I'm basically just copying into opt debugged and val, opt being the optimized release code, debug being a debug build, and val being a valgrind build. And then you can see the build binary script being executed either in the build PS or build directories, as we've seen, with the right option. So you can see all this work is being done for you. You don't really have to do anything. And then basically it extracts the tarballs, moves them nicely into one folder higher, cleans up the directories. You can see that happening here. Also, first it moves them, cleans up the directories, extracts them, gives you a nice status overview, and basically you got your optimized debug valgrind ready to go. So very straightforward. All you do is you make that directory git, you go git init, you go git clone, you grab that URL from the git website, you change into the directory, you check out 5.6, you execute build Percona, and you basically end up with 3 nice tarballs, 3 nicely extracted directories that have just a standard, the debug, and the valgrind builds there. So the other build scripts show a few more examples about how to do things more manually, but this would probably be the most straightforward method. So let's recap one more time. We'll just go here. I'll just make sure that everything is gone. So what would we do? We would create this directory in the root. Bazaar 2 in this case, maybe not such a good directory. So let me just make directory git2 or git3. Change the owner and the group to yourself. Change the privileges, if you're happy with that, to full. Jump in there, do an init, so make sure that you've previously done the git install. Make sure that you got all your build tools ready. Git clone, grab that URL that we've seen from here, just copy that into the clipboard. Come back here, clone that. Doing that will create a Percona Server directory. So I'm just gonna change into the Percona Server directory. Then you would git checkout 5.6 and you would build Percona. And that would give you an optimized or a release and also a debug and valgrind build ready for you to play around with. The alternative to doing this, and this is even shorter, this also doesn't require any tools to be installed except for wget, I think. There is a script that's called get Percona, very straightforward, and all you have to specify is whether you want 5.5 or 5.6, so basically just add that to the invocation. So you go 5.6, and basically what this would do is it would go to our Jenkins farm and pull all the latest builds, optimized, debug, and valgrind, which have been done nightly. So and are also done in a QA format. Now these are really not for production use because they use YaSSL just as a hacky way of avoiding all the OpenSSL issues for quick testing for QA purposes. But it is quite a handy way if you want to start playing with the various build types. Okay, so let's have a quick recap. We had a look at Git, we had a look at Bazaar, just for historical purposes. We had a look into compiling in different ways, so you remember the build-binary script, and we had a look into cmake, and we had a look into some other scripts that would really fall under this build tool. So the build Percona script and get Percona script. So again, all these are mainly for QA purposes. You want to make sure that you don't use these in production because they've been slightly altered in terms of SSL setup. Okay, that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. The next one is going to be very interesting on GDB. Please join me for that one. It will be fully hands-on. Enjoy.